Hey, this is Dwyer Brown. I played John Kinsella in the movie Field of Dreams, and you're watching the Amato Podcast. Hey guys, want to have a catch?
All right, here we are today. We're talking to Wayne Randazzo. He is one of the voices of the New York Mets radio team, the other being Howie Rose, of course. Welcome.
All right, Ryan, thanks for having me.
I appreciate you being on. Let's just get it out of the way. And obviously, this virus is affecting everybody. I told you before, my son works for Rawlings, so he was shut down right away when they canceled all the college sports and Major League Baseball is on hold. How are you holding up?
Yeah, I mean, as best as anyone, everybody that is close to me is healthy right now, which is the most important thing. And we're just trying to get through it one day at a time here, and hopefully get back to for everybody, get back to our normal lives. And of course, we want to see all the strain that's being put on the healthcare system and the healthcare workers, start to simmer down. So. Our thoughts are certainly with everybody that's kind of on the front lines of this, and we hope that things can get back to normal for everybody as soon as possible.
How do you? So your talent is your voice, obviously, and your brain. How do you keep in practice?
Well, it was spring training had just started, and I do a lot of work in the off season with football and college basketball, so I'm usually pretty busy, and it's been an unusual time here now. I think almost or a little over 3 weeks since we last called a game on radio, and it's not what we expected at all. So as far as keeping in practice, nothing really that I can do or that is necessary to do. I've been voicing over a few things and just trying to stay sharp that way, but. Otherwise, just waiting to see how this thing plays out and hoping to get back to do what I normally do pretty soon.
Yeah, no, definitely for everybody. How did you first get involved with radio when you were younger?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of always something I wanted to do. I was always a baseball junkie and someone who really enjoyed broadcasting. On top of that, I always kind of sunk my teeth into watching even local news as a young kid just to see the broadcasts, not really to get any news. I like just seeing how they handled the news. And, it was the same thing with baseball announcers and football announcers. And that was really just something I wanted to pursue as a career when I could. So I did. I went to college for it and, just kind of unraveled to the point where I was starting to make enough of a headway to get some major league opportunities, and was fortunate to land in New York and to work with Howie and at the time with Josh Lewin, and they were so welcoming and great to me on the Mets radio side, and was able to make great relationships with everybody in the Mets organization and with SNY, and got to fill in on TV too as well. So. It's been great. I love being a part of the Mets organization, and just an honor to be in the long line of the great broadcasters they've had.
Are you able to, while you're doing it, just kind of step back and realize, like, wow, I'm working with next to Howie Rose is number one, yeah. But just working for Major League Baseball or for the Mets.
Yeah, I mean it's incredible every day to step into the stadium and to watch the games live, and I never take any of that for granted. I've seen a lot of people saying they're not going to take their lives for granted anymore. I never really have. I've always been extremely grateful for these opportunities, and to the Wilpon family and to first WOR and now WCBS. It's been fantastic, and it's hard to get away from the history of it, because in our radio booth we have a huge picture, almost the entire wall is taken up by a great photo that we have of Bob Murphy, Ralph Kiner, and Lindsey Nelson, the original 3 Mets broadcasters, taken sometime in the 1960s, that just kind of looms over our booth and is just a constant reminder of the lineage that the Mets have in their booths over the years.
Well, definitely radio is I enjoy listening to radio more than I actually like watching the games. It just paints a different picture of the game. So you're definitely, in everybody's heads and a part of the history of the team. Being next to Howie Rose, when you first came in and maybe did your first game, was it a little overwhelming, or were you able to just step in and do your thing?
You know, as a non-native New Yorker, it probably would have been more overwhelming if I was from New York. I'm not, and so I didn't start listening to Howie until I was probably in college, or maybe even a little bit after college, when I was starting to just kind of, use the MLB audio package and listen around the league and start to think about whose styles I liked and who I liked listening to. And of course, Howie was one of them. He's one of the best in the game. And I'd always check in on Mets games just to hear Howie. So from that standpoint, it was very cool. And it's really, for me, and this goes to Gary too. It's more about just learning from those guys on a daily basis. And when I started, it was 2015 was my first year, and I was just so awestruck by how Howie and Gary approach their daily jobs. I mean, they tackled every day as a new day. And in baseball, that can be hard to do. They never gave a day away. They never laid back, not once. And their questions in the interviews, in the pregame interviews, were always so well thought out and so well researched. And it was just a true learning experience for me as a rookie major league announcer, to watch those guys every day, how they went about their business. I learned a lot just from watching them, not let alone all the questions I had for those two over the last handful of years. So I feel like I'm much more of a polished announcer because of everything that I've seen them do on a regular basis.
Who were your mentors when you were coming up? Well, you're from Chicago.
Yeah, the voice of the Cubs, Pat Hughes, has always been someone that has listened to my tapes and given me feedback and encouraged me to, keep going and keep trying to make a career out of this. So he was pretty instrumental in helping me get to this point. And, I know he put a good word into Howie for me when I was first applying for the job back in 2015. So, he's certainly someone that I wouldn't be here without. My first internship was at WGN Radio in Chicago, one of the most storied stations in the country. And at the time, they were still doing the Cubs games, so I got to know Pat a little bit then, and Andy Mazer, who was the pregame show host for the Cubs at the time, and Mike Farron, who was really just a producer at WGN Radio, who hired me as an intern in 2005, who's now pregame and postgame show host for the Diamondbacks, and he works for MLB Network Radio. So, all these guys have were stepping up for me at a pretty young age to listen to my tapes and to tell me, kind of what direction I should take and all that. I mean, they were so helpful to me early on. And, I took a lot of their advice and used it to get where I am.
How do you find your voice? How do you find your style? Is it always developing as you were coming up? Do you ever find yourself maybe sounding like somebody else because you admired them?
Yeah, I was, as a kid, I listened to a lot of broadcasters, and I always really liked Tom Brenneman's style. I thought he was really good, and Pat and John Rooney and guys who are around the Chicago area. When I started I did minor league baseball for about 7 years. And, those first few years when I was down in Alabama doing games for Mobile, that was the time to really hone your skills and be a fundamentally good play-by-play announcer and learn how to do this and really just lock yourself in a booth 3 hours every night in the middle of the South and in the middle of these hot summers and just learn the craft. And I really feel like that has set me off into a different path because I was able to do that. I don't know how I would have done it without those reps in the minor leagues. Some guys don't. Howie never did a minor league game.
Oh.
Gary did. So it's just different paths for everybody. But for me, it was instrumental to have those minor league years and to get those opportunities in a low pressure environment to do it. But I still think my style is developing. Last year was the first time I got to do 162 games in a season at the major league level. Before I was just, I'd fill in here and there and did about 30 or 40 games a year. But now I'm doing them all, and I still think that my style in some ways is developing.
What do you guys do when the game is just out of hand and it's 12-2 and it's just not a good game, a good quality game? How do you stay in your zone?
Well, yeah, we still got to be there. We got to be there until the last out, and it's we try to have fun with it. It's not that fun if the Mets are losing 12-2. If they're winning 12-2, that's a bit different. But regardless of the outcome, we're just trying to have fun on the air and present a good broadcast. I think that it's important for us to be researched, and it's important for us to have all of our notes in place and to know everything about the players that are coming into the game. But I think it's important for us too to have a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I work with a guy who might be the most fun announcer in the major leagues in Howie, who can keep it really light and has such a knack for timing on when it's a good time to be like that and when it's a good time to not, because there are times where the game dictates that you have to be hyper focused on it. And I think I take my cues from him and just kind of feel him out and know where he's at to give what I think is necessary for the moment.
I watched the video yesterday you guys put out with Howie and yourself from WCBS Radio 880 on YouTube. The takeaway I got, I thought it was a great idea, was to try, whatever kind of season we're going to have, whether it's going to be, cut in half, whether he's going to try, they're going to try just to play the divisional competition. But Howie opened it up and said, why it might be a great time to try all the different rule changes that they might want to implement, and just throw them out there and make it a really great, interesting season, whatever type of season we have. Do you have any thoughts on that? What type of season we're going to have, or what we should do?
Yeah, well, I do think that the biggest thing I would do in a shortened but hastened season, I think it's going to be a furious pace to it, where there won't be many off days, and there will be a lot of double headers. So you might see the extra inning rules come into play, whether that's ties or whether that's putting a runner on second base. Maybe as soon as the 10th inning, you throw that guy out there. I do think some of those things should be largely considered for what will be an unusual season. Beyond that, I don't know. Maybe they do put the DH in the National League this year as a test trial, just to alleviate again as much of the pressure off the pitchers as possible, because the pitchers are the one that are really going to be taxed here. They're going to probably have a shortened revamp to the season because of spring training. They're not going to get 6 weeks or certainly not even a month to get back going. So the pitchers are going to be behind once the real season begins. And then they're going to have all these extra games in a shortened amount of time. So it's going to be interesting for the pitchers especially. And I'm sure that baseball will allow a bunch of extra pitchers on the roster. I would imagine, the limit was supposed to be 13. That could be 15 or even 16. Or maybe even 17. I mean, they are going to allow a lot of extra pitchers this year, and maybe to help them out, they just say, you know what, it'd be good to have the DH for the National League. So, yeah, I think we will see at least a few things that look different, and maybe it does get more radicalized as we lose time here.
I think in a weird way, this actually, maybe not that there's a benefit to it, but players who had injuries like Cespedes, Judd Lowry, this down off time has to benefit them in some way.
Yeah, well, I think it'll get Yoenis on the field sooner as far as the beginning of the season is concerned. Michael Conforto had that oblique injury in spring training, and that'll be a non-factor once the season gets going for him. Jed Lowry, who knows? Jed has still been battling this thing, and it's been so long that you really can't count on him for anything at this point. But yeah, I'm sure an extra couple of months will help. It certainly has given the Mets some opportunities here to figure out their pitching now that Noah Syndergaard won't be a part of it for this season. So, I still think they're in good shape, and really, if depending on the number of games, if it's only 80 games, there's no favorites and there's no underdogs in my mind. Even the Marlins, I feel like an 80 game season, if there's an expanded playoff, even I wouldn't count them out to just go 40 and 40 and make the playoffs if there are so many teams that are going to be in it. So it's going to be an unusual year. But the point will be just to be out there and to play games again and to crown a champion.
What is your take? I'm going to call it the mystique of the injury situations with the Mets, where it just seems like they come out of the blue, or you just never know all the information. Um, is that just something
Yeah.
they keep very tight to themselves?
Well, I don't think any team is better or worse in that regard. I think that we saw what the Yankees went through last year. I mean, they had
Mm.
lost almost everybody on their roster at one point or another, and already at the beginning of the spring they were having trouble. Judge was going to be out, Stanton was going to be out again. So it happens because when you think about the Mets, you think about pitching and you think about how they've relied so heavily on it, but pitchers are the most susceptible to injuries. And now you'll have all of your starters that you relied heavily on at one point that underwent at least a Tommy John surgery. Now that Syndergaard has had it, so it's a tough game, and I think that the daily grind of it makes it so, and it's tough to keep players on the field in general. But I thought the Mets generally were pretty healthy last year, and I think that's part of the reason why it kind of feels even more disappointing that they didn't make the playoffs because they did have health, pretty largely on their side.
Hmm. Can we just go around the team a little bit, and then just go from there? So Pete Alonso obviously had a crazy season. Um, I still think even in a shortened season, he's going to be very, destructive to pitching. Who's, as you just said, is going to be very vulnerable around the league. Can he keep that pace up, or do you think they'll catch up to him a little bit?
Yeah, I mean it's tough for anybody to hit that many home runs in any certain amount of time. I mean, 53 led the majors last year, so he was on a pace all to himself. Let alone what he did as a rookie and as a Met. Something that's things that have just never happened before. So, can he hit 50 home runs every season? I mean, sure he could in terms of theory, but as far as applying that and doing it, that's a totally different thing. But I know that Pete is a tireless worker and has a lot of confidence and has a good approach at the plate, and he has tremendous power. So, to think that he won't be a regular part of the league leaders in home runs, I think he will be, and I think that he's still pretty young. Maybe a little older than most players at this point in their careers. I mean, he's 25. He'll be 26 in December. So you're catching him really in the prime of his career at the beginning of his career. So you hope that these next 4, 5, 6 years you see some monstrous numbers from him.
How about Robinson Cano? I mean, obviously they need him to be the Robinson Cano of the past. I mean, he dealt with some injuries as well, so this has to benefit him.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be good for a guy like Robbie not to have 6 months of a season and to keep those legs healthy for as long as he needs to. But he's still on the back end of his career and a guy who is advanced to an age where a lot of players don't stay productive. Very few have of the last handful of years stayed productive at the age he's at. That being said, Cano is a Hall of Fame generational type talent, and you just hope that his curve downward is a little bit different than most players because of where he's starting from. Last year I think you kind of have to throw out a little bit because of the fact that he was ailing so badly. But they hope this year they can keep him healthy. And again, if Lowry is out there and some of these guys are around, Cespedes and Davis and McNeil, you could give Cano some time to keep his legs as the season goes along. Although he's been kind of reticent to that and not wanting to take much time off. But we'll see how it turns out for him.
And I was just going to ask you, what if Cespedes is ready to play? What does the outfield look like?
Well, he's another guy that I don't know that would play every single day. I mean, it'd be a lot to ask for what he's gone through with his legs and his heels and all that to play every single day and play twice a day if they're going to have all these double headers. So, JD Davis will still get his time, and Dom, I think, will still get his time as well. And it's going to be nice for them to have Yoenis, because he's, I think, still going to be a destructive hitter. Watching his batting practice live pitching, but there was some simulation of that as well. It's very clear that he could still hit, and I think he'll put up some numbers with regard to that. Now, the running and the outfield play might not look like how it used to, but I think the bat will still be there.
And they're going to mix in Jake Marisnick, who I like a lot. I think he's going to help out a ton out there.
Yeah, if defensively he's as good as anyone. He's got great speed, and we'll see. I think Ryan Cordell made a good impression in camp this year. Another guy who's kind of similar to Marisnick in terms of speed and defense, and a good athlete. So I think they've tried to insulate themselves as well as possible, and we'll see. Hopefully they'll get a chance to put it to use on the field.
And last, the starting pitching and the relief pitching, that Marcus Stroman trade obviously is very important now because they lost Noah. How does the back end of the rotation kind of stack up?
Well, I think they're okay as far as 5. Now, this might be a season where you kind of need 6. So, does Seth Lugo finally get that chance to be a starter? Does Robert Gesellman get a look? Some of these guys, these minor league types, will Drew Smith be ready now that he's been given some extra time here? David Peterson looked good in spring training. So I think it's going to be all hands on deck for a lot of teams as far as the pitching goes. And, the richer you are, the stronger you are in terms of your pitching. I think the deeper you are, the better off you're going to be. So for a team like the Mets, even without Syndergaard, I still think they're in pretty good shape. And, as long as the guys like Michael Wacha and Porcello and Matz are healthy and can give you some valuable innings, I think that will be beneficial to them.
So if I made you guess right now, give us some good news. When do we see baseball?
I don't know. I don't know when we're going to see it, and I don't know when, what that will look like. You hear so many different things every day. I know that they're committed to play. I know that they are committed to play well beyond the norm in terms of the calendar. Baseball usually ends around Halloween, sometimes leaks into early November. I think they are committed to playing well beyond that. If that's Thanksgiving or even into early December, I think we'll see baseball at an unusual time of the year, which I think is okay. I think people want to see them on the field as long as possible, and I think that the West Coast teams and those stadiums will be used for playoff games or World Series games if necessary. And I saw a rumor or a speculation or some sort of source report that Dodger Stadium, as the All-Star host this year, instead would be the neutral site World Series host. So there's everything's on the table, but I know that they're committed to get out there. June sounds optimistic, quite frankly. You might be looking at July before they get going. But even so, what I think is important for them is that even if it's August, that I think it's okay. If it's an 80-game season or if it's a 60-game season, I think it's worth them going out there and playing and having something this year. I don't unless it truly gets to the point where it's September and you're still not out there, then maybe you cancel the season. But I don't think they should make that move until it's totally to the point on the calendar where it just makes sense to. I'd hate for them to say we're not going to play and we're going to cancel the season in May. I think they need to wait this out as long as possible and realize that, even a completely shortened, unusual season, 50, 60 games is better than nothing. And, it might be unusual. You might have to crown a World Series champion that, maybe wouldn't have won it in any other year, but so what? I think people just want to see the game and be at the games and celebrate it. And hopefully at the very least they'll play even if there are no fans. But of course, it won't be the same. And we want to see full stadiums again.
We'll take anything that they have to offer. Will be fine. Um, what are you doing every day now? Is it just to keep yourself busy?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a tough thing, just trying to, reading more and watching Netflix like everybody else, and weather's warming up, so maybe go outside for a run and then get back inside as quick as possible. My daughter's doing e-learning and all that, so there's an adjustment there for her too, and just trying to keep everybody in line here as far as staying healthy and staying optimistic that this will be over soon. So, we'll see. Everything's good on my end, and my thoughts are just that everybody that's suffering right now, and the people that are ill or that have lost family members or close friends because of this, and all the healthcare workers, especially the people in New York who are really battling this thing. And we're just worried about them and hoping that things get better soon.
Awesome, Wayne. I appreciate it. It's great to hear your voice. It's good to see you.
Okay, Ryan.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Talk to you soon.
All right, appreciate it.